Every day, we're here for you. We get things off the ground, keeping you connected. We're here keeping you safe and secure. We keep things running smoothly and know the importance of giving back. Every day, we're here. ARA, here for you, here for good.
Welcome to Everyday Greatness, and thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Barnaby Howarth. We're coming to you from Swans HQ in Moore Park. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we meet, the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. I want to pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. One of the proudest things I can say about myself is that I am Australian. So this acknowledgement comes from my heart. I want to thank sincerely our Indigenous brothers and sisters for sharing their land with us. And today I'll be sitting down with two people who prove beyond doubt that good things happen to good people. CEO of the Australian College of Perioperative Nurses and daughter of legendary Swans fans Kenny and Yvonne Williams, Diane Williams-Harapin, and the Manager of Custom Operations at the Sydney Swans, Anita Murphy. Diane and Anita, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thanks, Barnaby.
Thanks for having us, Barnaby.
No problem. There's an old adage that says, nice guys finish last. But there's another one that says, be nice to people on your way up because you'll meet them again on your way down.
Yep.
It's a conundrum almost everybody faces at some point or another. Should you be nice to the point of being a sucker, or should you sell your soul to the devil and stab your best mate in the back so that you can feather your own nest? There may be no right or wrong answer to that conundrum, but our guests today, Diane and Anita, prove that being nice without question is all a person needs to do. One of the strongest arguments against being nice without question is that it leaves you open to being unscrupulously taken down by people who want to win at all costs. But Diane and Anita ruthlessly squashed that argument. Diane's parents, Kenny and Yvonne, have been surrogate grandparents to most of the Swans players for the last 40 years. Kenny and Yvonne set the perfect example for Diane to always try and be nice because it's better than to give it's better to give than it is to take. Kenny and Yvonne made dinner for most of the 2005 and 2012 Swans Premiership team. Both of them volunteered their time and service to the Swans over nearly half a century and never asked for anything in return. And Diane uses those lessons in her own life. She's used her skills and business acumen to help out at various organisations around the world, from the medical field to adoption to community support during COVID-19 lockdowns. One of the other big arguments against being nice is that you rarely get any tangible rewards. Sure, you sleep well at night and you can look at yourself in front of the mirror, but sometimes people need actual things to prove that something's been worthwhile. But once again, Diane ruthlessly squashes that argument. Last year, Diane was awarded an Order of Australia Medal, one of the most tangible awards a person can get in Australia. Now, I'm not going to pretend for 1 second that Anita and I are best mates. Anita and I don't know each other from a bar of soap. But Anita's worked at the Sydney Swans since 2011, and she's a good family friend of Diane and the entire Williams family. And any friend of Diane's is a friend of mine. So let's sit and find out whether being a good person without question is enough to get you ahead in life. And let's speak to Diane and Anita. Anita, let's start with you. Firstly, for non-football fans or Swans fans, just tell us practically what Kenny and Yvonne Williams did for the Swans over their service to the club.
Yeah, so I think Kenny in particular, and then by association, Yvonne, are very much our most passionate supporters. You see a picture of Kenny and you know that he's associated with the club. He was obviously born in South Melbourne, grew up around the corner from Lake Oval, which is where South Melbourne were originally before we moved up to Sydney. And then when Kenny relocated to Sydney later in life and South Melbourne obviously did the same thing up here. He decided to come along and help out wherever he could. So he was very passionate. He was selfless, would always volunteer his time. So I don't think we could have paid him even if we wanted to be here, because that was all he wanted. He just wanted to be here, go behind the boys and support them, whether it was at the games, so behind the goals, which is I think where we know him a lot from, to being our hydration specialist at training sessions. So, yeah, definitely, passionate, personified to this club is Kenny and Yvonne.
Now, Diane, Kenny and Yvonne are kind of mythical Swans fans. They're a bit of a cult couple. Tell us, though, what it was like growing up in the Williams household behind the public eye.
Okay, so Anita, you're so right. That was all accurate. Dad was actually a jockey. What's really funny is over the years people have said to me, what position did he play for the Swans or for the Boroughs, which was the local team? I'm like, have you seen him? He's tiny. So he was a jockey and he came up here to ride track work for Tommy Smith. And I think one thing that he it was always this song called The Boroughs. We're the Boroughs down by the sea. I could sing it now. It's like the local South Melbourne, I think, team. And that was like the song of our household. And then it was always the Bloods. And even I don't even think I knew that it was the Swans. I thought they were the Bloods growing up. And he was always any opportunity, and in New South Welsh people, he was using every opportunity to tell them about this amazing game that was from Victoria. And of course, it was in those days, it was all NRL. I think one thing that really resonates with me is every opportunity Dad had to volunteer at anything in life, he took that. And so growing up in my house, he definitely instilled in me that you actually meet the best people through volunteerism, through club sport and through clans, and whatever that clan could be. It could be involvement in like needlework or a cooking club or a mechanic group or something. But he always used to say, get involved. And I think that's sort of why today I'm particularly, and my kids are really interested in that area of volunteerism. And Mum kind of got dragged along for the ride. And she was very, Dad loved his publicity. Oh my gosh, Anita and I would be in touch, and the media would come to me. So I kind of ran my dad's publicity since I was about 16 when he started to get interviewed. And some of the reasons why I'm in my career is I learned about marketing and getting people involved in organisations through Dad and through the media piece. And Mum was very shy about the media, but she just wanted to be there with him. Whatever he did, she was by his side. And the last week would have been their 70th wedding anniversary. So they were together since she was nearly 16. So it's sort of, they were a great couple like that. And they're not so mythical as in quite extraordinary. And when we walked down the street in Melbourne, like we couldn't go a block without someone, offering Dad something to sign. He once someone tried to get him to sign the Bible. I think he said no to that. Another time there was a Collingwood hat and he said no to that. But people, since he passed, have come out of the woodwork and said, we have this thing signed by your dad. Or my son had always wanted to meet the great Kenny, and he, Dad would get down low and chat to children. He loved children. So that kind of has definitely been instilled in myself and my family.
Very mythical. Now, this is a question without notice. I heard a rumour that you can tell me if is true or not, that your dad broke into the AFL Grand Final to see the Swans premiership 100 years ago.
Yeah, well, just as well the police didn't know why he was still on the planet. Yes, he did. So his grandmother was an Irish lady called Elizabeth McCormack, and she was into Gaelic football, and when she found AFL she was immediately in love with the game. And I think it was like threepence or 3 penny or some weird old currency is what you needed. And Dad lived basically in I suppose what you would call probably Housing Commission or the projects in South Melbourne, and they had a little house that first of all, he lived in Bendigo and then he lived in Port, and everyone shared like a backyard. So it was like a communal environment, and someone had got the idea to go and break in, and his nana thought it was a great idea. So she took him, and I think he was only like 3 or 5 or something, and they actually burrowed under the fence, and she pushed Dad in, and I think the grandma had to stay outside because she couldn't fit through the hole they made. And he said why he was there, he was talking to everyone, trying to get to know them because he thought, I'll never get to a grand final again. This is like the only time I can, break in and climb and crawl under a fence. So, yes, it is a true story.
So how nice was it seeing his face when the Swans won the 2005 premiership 72 years later?
Oh, my gosh, Barnaby, you have no idea. It was like, what was really weird is those of us who were in the dressing room, I always thought when that day came, and obviously I lived it because I don't even like sport, like in all honesty. I'm a bit unco. I'm very tall and I never really liked sport. I've always liked kind of horse racing, which Dad loved. But this one thing was just too it was addictive when you were around Mum and Dad. You just had to love, and that's why he used to get lots of members. Anita will tell you he was always signing up members for many years. So when they won, I thought it would be this crazy jubilation. On the field it was, and my dad was there with them. And I remember I had my son Eden, who's a mad Swans fan. He's Kenny reincarnated. He's now nearly 20. He was a baby and I was holding him. And there's this vision, the last vision of the grand final on TV was a bizarre thing because we're in nowhere land and the camera came right to my son and I'd thrown him over my shoulder at that exact second and it was his face. Now he loves the Swans. And then I couldn't find my parents. It was madness. And then when we got in the dressing room, it was so quiet. It was all this madness and then there was this absolute calm. And like Adam Goods picked me up by both his arms, kissed me on the top of the head and put me down again with no words. My dad was just looking at everyone and goes, can you believe it? He was crying. He was not one to cry. He was crying. And Mum, all the wags and the dags, I'm a dag, daughter and girlfriend, Mum's a wag, we were just hugging each other because it was such a shared joy. And then after this kind of crazy space, all the people that were in there will inform you, everyone was really quiet and everyone was just looking around just going, did that happen? Because there was that almost like realisation of the elation and then the actual peace. So it was very peaceful. That's the one thing that I remember about that day all the hugs. It was just beautiful.
That's very cool. That got me pumped up, that story. Now, Anita, given all that mystical passion and love of Kenny and Yvonne, what has their association to the Sydney Swans meant for this football club?
Oh, it's a good question. I think it's just about showing that, if you have that passion for something and you genuinely want, I say that thing, so the footy club, to go well, you don't kind of expect something in return for it. Don't get me wrong, as a footy club commercially and football-wise, your goal is always to win a premiership, right? And, your members and fans will say, we want to win a premiership. But, Kenny and Yvonne just showed that by doing simple things, you add to that. So, running water, so, helping out. The number of young men that have come through this club that have been to your house, that have had baked dinners and had their, their clothes washed by Yvonne, they help lift everyone else up around them.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, let's talk about choosing to be nice rather than nasty. Now, Anita, you and I don't know each other from a bar of soap.
She's really nice. You've picked a good one there.
I'm getting that impression. Was there one moment in your life where you decided you were going to be nice rather than be nasty and feather your own nest?
So it's an interesting one and one that I've been thinking about, and there wasn't one specific example that I guess I could think of. But in saying that, I guess I think I would like to think that I'm self-aware enough that there's probably times where, unfortunately, I may have been nasty to someone, but I don't ever think it's been deliberate. Again, I can't really pick out a time specifically, or vice versa. Like, to me, nasty is not really going to get you anywhere.
No.
It might push you further to the front for a couple of minutes or for a particular thing, but you can't sustain that. So I think it's better that even if for you it means you take a step back or you're providing guidance to someone else potentially that might land them the job instead of you, down the track, I think that's rewarded in some way, shape or form. I don't know if that's karma.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just being nice. But to your point earlier, you don't want people to walk all over you, right? You don't want to be nice enough that people are like, oh, I'll just go to Anita because she'll just do that, or she'll just give me that, or she'll, push me in the right direction type thing. But I guess to my point earlier, you want to build people up. You want to give them as much information or help that they need to get further, so that hopefully that does come back to you in some way over time.
Very good answer. Very, very good answer from someone I've never heard of.
Yeah.
Now, Diane, let's ask you, have you ever been tempted to do something ruthless to get ahead yourself?
So I'm an ex-primary school teacher, so their teachers are generally amazing people for little people, and we do get we do struggle sometimes in the adult world because we get reflective of the young people, and children are so innocent and they're open, honest and transparent. They're very seldom not like that. So I always say to people, if you want to learn anything about life, go and spend a day with the kindergarten class, 5-year-olds, because they'll just tell you how you see it. So in my work, I always say to people, how do you like things fed back to you? Because I have a lot of feedback and I have a lot of team members. And then I kind of work within that construct. And sometimes people like it more authentic. And I say, look, I'm just going to give it to you where, and that would be the only way I could think someone would think, oh, well, that's not the best sort of almost like message. But, like Anita said, we're in commercial spaces. Even though I work in the charity sector, we still have to survive. The charity sector is the same as big business. We have the same problems, we have the same concerns, we have mandates, but we have less resources, human and financial, to deal with those same concerns. So you still have to keep moving. But I have to say, reflecting on that, my dad, he really didn't even say anything bad about other teams. And if the boys did poorly or they weren't doing their personal best, I would say to him all the time, what do you say to them? And I think I've told you this, Anita. And he'd say, I say nothing, because they beat themselves up. And that's kind of what I think. If someone needs some really strong feedback in a work environment, of course I've got to give it. Otherwise I wouldn't end up a not-for-profit CEO. I wouldn't survive. But I do a lot of volunteer work, and that's when you really got to treat people in a precious fashion, because that's their time. Time is precious, and volunteers aren't easy to come by and they aren't easy to keep. I don't really think of myself as nice. I think myself as honest, open and transparent and real. And I love your word real. You use the word real all the time, Barnaby, and that's what it is. Just be real. But I'm not unkind, and Dad was so kind, wasn't he, Anita? He's so thoughtful. Anita's very thoughtful too. She'll text me and say hi, my mum is. Those kind of people I'm attracted to. So nice begets nice, similar to what Anita said, and you'll always get back what you put in. So if you put in negativity or unkindness, then guess what's going to happen? And is it karma? I don't know. It's just what are we here for? We're here to give love and receive it in return, and whatever that looks like.
Well, you may not think you're nice, Diane, but I think you're lovely. So unlucky for you.
No, now, be a long time.
Anita, on all of that stuff, can you give any examples of people getting tangible rewards based on just an accumulation of small goodness rather than a nasty, backstabbing, ruthless person?
Yeah, so I think Kenny and Yvonne, given that they're a key theme today, they had been with the club for such a long time. They had volunteered their time, key members of this family, and they were awarded with life membership in 2000 and
I think it was something. 2002, and Dad rang me and he was crying. Again, he doesn't cry very often, and Mum was crying, and they rang me on a payphone. That's how long ago this is. And I thought something was wrong, and then he said it was the best day of his life. I was like, well, what about like when I was born or my graduation or your marriage? And he's like, no, this is it.
Yeah. So I think if you go out there specifically to do nice things for people so you get something in return, like that's going to backfire on you, and it's not your, I guess, natural state of being or doing something. So it's not going to last.
No.
Whereas, again, Kenny and Yvonne, kindness personified. So to them, it wasn't a chore. It wasn't something they had to get up and think about every day, apart from the fact they just wanted to be at the club, with the club, helping the club. And that just naturally came from their
good
kindness
place.
and
Yeah.
being nice people.
At one stage, can I piggyback on that? Dad had been offered, it was a long time ago, some sort of role which was paid. Have I ever told you this story, Anita?
I don't think so.
I told you either, Barnaby. And he came home and he said to Mum, it was like a training role before there was all the structures. And Mum had been like washing up at the members' events and putting the rubbish away with. So Uncle Ron Barassi and my mum and Andrew McMasters were the cleaners after the membership event. That's what we were at. And he said, but I can't take a role because I have to leave you behind the goalposts alone, Yvonne. So he didn't want the money. He wanted to be with Mum and be, with the boys.
That's the first story of your father you've told where he didn't cry. You keep saying he didn't cry very much, but every story you've told he's cried.
He doesn't cry very often, but they're the big moments, right?
Very true. So, Diane, in saying all that, what advice do you give to young people who are facing this question whether they should be nasty to get ahead or whether they should just stick to being a nice person and volunteering? What do you tell them which way they should go?
So I work as a volunteer at Sydney University. I went to university part-time 17 years on scholarships and I worked full-time at the same time. So I give back there and I love that work. But I work with young executive women to help to champion them, just that sort of buffer between the third space between work, home, and then there's me. And we talk about this all the time because they often get opportunities to actually do a not so moral thing or an unethical thing, or they get an opportunity to put themselves ahead at a disadvantage to another or the entity or whatever, or the company. And I just sit there and say to them, how are you going to sleep at night, which is one of the things we said, and what are you going to get out of it? And is that a short-term goal? Because the long-term goal of being a good, decent person, reaps rewards life over. Everyone around you, it's infectious like Dad. You pass it on. It's good energy and you pass it on. The bad energy eventually, and I've had some people that I worked with or in my life that have been negative, that eventually is toxic and it'll poison everyone around you. The club always, and there's an expression which has a swear word in it, which I won't say, but the club has always had this internal meter for behaviour.
A policy?
Yes.
No dickheads policy?
There we go.
feel like that
no
was
swearing
it.
on this podcast.
Yeah. My boss might be listening. So there is that policy, and Dad used to say we're very good at finding out who needs to get out of here quickly. Dad would never say their name. Dad would never say anything negative, but he'd say, I just think he was a bad fit or she was a bad fit or that didn't work out. And that is that policy, which I feel like there's not a policy document for.
No, unofficial.
A compliance document. And I do a lot with compliance, obviously, because I work in medicine. But that is actually the thing, Barnaby, of just in the long run, it gets to you, it gets to everyone. So choose the way. So whatever, if you have other people at the top of your list to care for, someone will put you at the top of their list. So I tell my kids, look after other people and they'll look after you, not in a simplistic way, but actually in a it's almost like an enigmatic way, a way we can't explain.
Very good. So let me sum up your advice to young people
Sure.
quickly. You're saying to them, don't be a dickhead.
Read the policy document, page 37.
Now, Anita, let's talk about that particular policy. The Sydney Swans found themselves in some pretty desperate times in the 1990s. Finished on the bottom of the AFL ladder 3 years in a row, low membership numbers. Things were looking bleak. You weren't working at the Swans then, but did you think it was a risky choice when the Swans adopted the Bloods culture in 2003, basically pinning the entire football club's hopes to a culture of everybody being kind?
I don't see the Bloods culture as everyone being kind, to start with. Not saying that they're nasty, but, I was reading a couple of things before we came in here today, and one of them was around Brett Kirk talking about the Bloods culture a number of years ago, and that is very much connecting us with our past and how we move forward into the future as a footy club. It's about, being loyal, being trustworthy, being considerate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, when the team, as an example, go out into the field, they just let the other team have the ball because that's a nice thing to do. They're obviously going to go out in the field and they're going to play their hardest within the rules to win. And currently that seems to be working, which is very nice. But then off the field, there's obviously a number of people that live by, the Bloods culture as well. So that's about, being considerate of your colleagues, of the team, of members, of fans, being loyal, trustworthy. So whatever you say you're going to do, following up on that. So I think it's a great thing that's happened for this club, and it's really kind of put a stake in the ground for us to live by and how we move forward with this club. So we obviously celebrated 150 years last week. As you said, I haven't been here for that whole period of time, which is good because otherwise I'm looking great for my age at 150. But I think, the club's never been in a stronger position. So I think it's definitely helped solidify the position in the league that we're in.
Very true. Now, Diane, when I played here in 1998, my father dropped me off for my first training session and your dad came to the window. He said, "Oh, hi, is he playing?" Wow. And my dad said, "Yeah, it's my son, Barnaby's having a crack." And your dad said to him, don't worry, we've got him. Amazing. So that was one of the beautiful stories of Kenny Williams that we've got. But I want to ask you, you talked about the pride in your parents' eyes after the premiership in 2005. Yep. What was it like in 2003 when the Bloods culture came in, which basically I felt like it almost put the emotions of your parents and the passion, the loyalty and all the stuff you talked about, Anita, into an actual tangible phrase. How proud were they when the Bloods culture came in?
So Dad grew up, as Anita said, near the lakeside, and there was a lot of what came from Melbourne, and we have quite a lot to do with the Melbourne members, and Dad always did. A lot of what came from Melbourne then flourished in Sydney, and both the cities, if you think about the history of the club, both the cities have definitely got an imprint. And there is many people, there's lots of people Dad's age, that Dad died at 93, who are that old, who have been around for nearly a century of the club. So that culture already existed. That was just the name for it. Like the Bloods was a name for it. People like Brett are amazing, Brett Kirk are amazing because they articulate something that's an enigma that we all struggle to describe. And I don't know if no dickheads policy is a part of it, but definitely that kind of there's been stages and they're cultural stages. So if you know anything about corporate culture, it just doesn't turn up because someone's the leader and has their name, on the door and they go, we're going to all be this. It's every, older lady that has chosen to spend the money that she has on her pension on a membership. And, congratulations, the membership team, it's like 70,000 or something. I looked on the other day on LinkedIn. It's huge. That is accumulation of hundreds of thousands of people, frankly. And when the times were tough and about just before you probably got here, Barnaby, and Mum and Dad, if you see that old footage, and I've got all these amazing old reels, were behind the goalpost with plastic bags on their head because they had no raincoat watching the team and there was literally no one in the stands. There were still people that were starting to build a core group around particularly Sydney, and people from Melbourne were still, saving their pennies to get up here. So that was one part, but it was really reflective of what was already happening. And I agree with Anita that we're always evolving. Everyone is always evolving, and footy clubs are just like organisations, and particularly because they have so many volunteers, and particularly because membership is you pay your membership, but then you're a part of this culture. You're buying a ticket to this beautiful thing. And so it's always evolving. And in 10 years, we'll see even a stronger club because there is a conscious decision and there are programs and processes, particularly the Academy and now the First Nations Academy. There's all these systems in place to strengthen those people from 150 years ago that had that passion and that belief and went out there with their football socks. And I can tell you, Barnaby, your story, I just love that story. I'll tell Mum when I see her this afternoon. But there are so many stories where people try and hold my hand and make me focus with them, and they tell me this big story and this long-winded stories about my dad, and I'm like, wow, when did that happen? That is amazing. So my advice to all of you out there is be a part of the next generation of this club. Put your hand up to do something. Get involved in junior AFL. That's where it all starts. and get your kid, particularly the girls out there. My 4 kids are all playing, and get the girls out there to actually join a team, because that's actually where we're going now. We've just started this beautiful female culture at the club. So that's what I think. We're in a continuum. We're just in this space right now.
Diane Williams-Harapin, you have just inspired me to be a part of the Sydney Swans family. And Anita Murphy, I need to apologise before we go. I said earlier I was referring to you and said you were someone I'd never heard of. That's really rude. I've heard of you and I know who you are.
Anita from membership.
I meant that I'd never met. That was really rude, so I apologise.
No, not a problem at all.
Well, thank you, Diane and Anita, for joining me on Everyday Greatness. It's been a really lovely chat.
Thanks, Barnaby.
Thanks, Barnaby.
And thank you to the Sydney Swans for hosting us so graciously at your headquarters. Thank you to the ARA Group for being our major sponsor for the 7th year in a row. Thank you to Look Studio Australia for your technical expertise, and to Facet Digital for your digital marketing assistance. And thank you guys for joining us. We hope we've helped make you feel proud of just being an everyday Joe bag of donuts. I hope you can join us next week on Everyday Greatness, where I'll speak to Serena Jackson from the Rainbow Swans and Walkley award-winning journalist from the ABC and member of the Flying Bats Soccer Club, Monique Shafter. We'll be talking about how people can find pride in the real them, in a world full of fake avatars and personal brands. We hope you can join us for that one. But if you want to find out more, go to the Everyday Greatness page at www.barnabyhowarth.com.au or follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube or LinkedIn. And you can also catch us on Swans TV on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.